What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, Under Center, presented by the Real Spiel podcast with Abelson. Happy Labor Day. It is Labor Day. Hope everybody safe weekend. Hope you could enjoy what seems to be the last of this pretty warm weather. Fall weather is coming in. It seems like it is starting to switch up. But fall weather does mean college football, and this is a college football podcast, so it's not the end of the world. There was a lot of college football on this weekend. So many good games, so many upsets, and crazy storylines. And that is what we are here to discuss today. Man, this is why I love college football because there's really no true other sports where you think one thing's going to happen in just complete chaos and complete mayhem go for college football. That's what happens when you have, all these amateur athletes playing. It's not professional sports where storylines are pretty predictable. College football is a sport that gives you so much unpredictability. So, man, I do not want to waste any time today. Let's get into it. Starting with arguably the game, some people are saying of the decade, the greatest regular season opener in college football history, Texas and Ohio State. Um, we were wrong about a handful of things this weekend. Um, this is definitely one of the things that we were right about some stuff too, but we were wrong, and I'll eat my crow. Texas and Ohio State. This is really not how I saw this game going. Obviously, the storyline is Arch Manning struggling mightily in his first, real true start. Ohio State's defense seems to still be very elite. Julian saying, let's talk about the quarterbacks because that's, in my opinion, I think was going to be the difference in which team won is which quarterback played the best. And although both quarterbacks didn't really play amazing, Julian Sang definitely shined a lot more than Arch Manning. The game plan Ohio State seemed to have been coming out with is they were trying to be conservative. I think as the game went on, they started to trust their defense more because they were actually getting plenty of stops. And I think they trusted their defense to get those stops. And the more the defense played well, the more conservative they kind of got. And it seemed like they did not want to put Julian Sang in a position to, kind of be the reason they lost the game. It was a lot of quick passes, a lot of short stuff. They were running the ball. And I thought he ran the game plan extremely well. He didn't make mistakes. He did not turn the ball over. He made timely throws, not crazy throws, but just timely throws on third down when you need to move the chains, hitting open receivers, hitting open targets. And that's the difference between him and Arch Manning in that game is Arch Manning those throws. Arch Manning, how many times Manning missed wide open passes to receivers? That critical one on fourth down or on the last possession where he had Ryan Wingo streaking across the middle and he puts it behind him, which I think brought up the fourth down. It was just Arch Manning did not look comfortable. He did not look poised. It kind of looked like the moment got to him a little too much, which again, to me, that was very surprising. I'm high on Arch Manning, and again, this is not a knock on him. I still think he's going to have a successful season. But I definitely thought he was going to play a lot better. I pointed out how he had two starts, albeit against lower level teams at home, not in this environment. I understand all that, but I thought that would have been enough to at least make him a little comfortable. And honestly, I don't think Sark helped him out either. I think Sark is arguably the best player caller in all of college football, but the plays that were getting called early in that game, it just was not making sense, man. It didn't seem like the play calling was trying to get Arch settled in, because as the game went on, he never was really truly able to get settled in. And I don't know if that was on him or if that was on the play calling. But the play calling from Sark was just a little questionable. Um, but yeah, Julian saying, shout out to you, man. You did exactly what you were asked to do. You didn't force any turnovers. You didn't force anything. You didn't take bad sacks. You didn't put your team in terrible positions. you move the chains, and he made key throws. That one touchdown throw to Carnell Tate. He made a couple throws to Jeremiah Smith, and he did exactly what he needed to do. So, um, Julian Sain definitely has the edge over Arch Manning that game. I will say though, we did start to see a little bit of flashes from March Manning towards the end of the game. Probably because Ohio State was probably just playing a little more lax defense, and they were forced to actually have to throw the ball. Arch Manning did start to let it rip in the fourth quarter. He had that great touchdown pass. That was a beautiful touchdown pass. He had a couple key throws on that final drive. But yeah, again, he just never looked comfortable and never seemed to get settled in. Um, Something else that I wanted to talk about was I think we have to have to start. I think we have to start having a conversation about Sark now. He is a great coach. He has gotten his teams to back to back national semi games, national semifinal games, one game away from playing for a national championship 2 years in a row. But he has struggled to win in big games, and people knock James Franklin and Penn State for this all the time. But I'm starting to see a trend from Sark. Last year, Georgia at home, loss. Georgia in the SEC championship game, loss. Ohio State, albeit a buzzsaw in Ohio State in the college football playoff, lost. I know they beat Clemson, but that Clemson team last year, I mean, they just out talented them, honestly. So that really wasn't a surprise. Home. Um, just it seems like that only win he has is that win on the road at Alabama 2 years ago. That kind of just that coattail just keeps riding from that win, but it's very um, concerning, I think, at this point because we really have not seen Texas win these big games. So I'm gonna have to start seeing that from Sark and Texas. They definitely will have plenty of opportunities to do that this year. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start seeing some of that. And shout out Ryan Day, shout out Ohio State. I'm not the biggest Ohio State fans. I'm not the biggest Ohio State fan. I think Ohio State fans are insufferable, but you can't knock that. Nobody really believed in them. Everybody was going for Texas, and they did what they had to do. They defended their national championship, opening game. They were at home. The fans showed up, and they put that defense put it on Texas, man. The defense actually put it on Texas, almost shutting that offense and that team to 0 points for the game. That was impressive, man. That was impressive. The next game I wanted to touch on is LSU and Clemson. This was probably in my opinion, the best game of the weekend. This was the game I was the most excited for, kind of more than the Texas and Ohio State game. Clemson and LSU. LSU came up to Death Valley and they made a statement, man. I am not gonna lie, they made a statement. Clemson has been a team me and everybody has been extremely high on. A lot of people, I don't have Clemson win the national championship, but a lot of people in the media and just around have Clemson going all the way and winning the national championship. And LSU came into Death Valley, didn't play extremely well in the first half, but stayed the course. Um, and the defense turned it on in the second half, man. Uh, the offense of Clemson is honestly what I thought was going to give Clemson the edge this year. Obviously, you know about the defense, Parker, Woods, Tom Allen coming from Penn State. Everybody knows about the defense. And LSU's defense, or I mean, Clemson's defense looked good. It looked good. You held that LSU team, that offense, to 17 points. I think they had 3 points in the first half. Um, the defense did their job, but the offense, man. And that was the thing that I thought LSU was going to be able to or Clemson was going to be able to hang their head on this year was the offense. Cade Klubnik's coming back, that elite wide receiver group that you guys have. That offensive play calling with Garrett Riley. Cade Klubnik getting another year under his belt, getting more experience, and that offense was disappointing, man. To only score 10 points, Cade Klubnik threw for 230 yards, but he wasn't really efficient. He threw an interception. He didn't throw any touchdowns. It was honestly, very concerning. And I don't know if it was a situation where, Clemson just got out talented. But LSU's defense, Baker, man, he's in his second year. LSU's defense has made a serious turnaround, and I think it has a potential to be really elite this year. because you held that Clemson offense to 10 points, 20 to 9, 30 rushing yards like that. The fact that Clemson could not run the ball whatsoever was mind blowing. Um, that was very shocking. And I had Clemson winning. I thought Clemson was going to cover. I thought that offense was going to be explosive. I bet the over on this game. Um, you know, now I know my lesson to never bet the overs on week one because I'm pretty sure almost every single under hit across like all the major games on this weekend. But yeah, the offense of Clemson looks pretty concerning. Again, you played an LSU team, a team who I have in the playoffs, the number 9 team in the country, a team that's going to be competing for the SEC championship. So that's a tough ask, but Clemson has such high expectations. They are a national championship contending team. You can't throw a dud out like that, man, especially when you have so much experience. 4-year quarterback, a offensive coordinator who's been in the system for multiple years now, a group of receivers. You just can't do that, man. You just cannot do that. So I'm still high on Clemson. Obviously, they're in the ACC. You know, they should have an easier path going through that conference compared to playing their SEC counterparts. But yeah, this is like what the third straight loss they've taken to an SEC team, or the third or fourth straight loss. If they want to win the national championship, they're gonna have to be able to compete. I'm not jumping off the Clemson ship, but they're gonna have to be able to compete. But LSU, man, Brian Kelly, he shut the haters up. He's never been able to win in the openers. He was able to do that. Garrett Nussmeier played, I think, extremely well. The stats weren't mind blowing. He threw for 230 yards, threw for a touchdown, but he didn't really make any mistakes. He kept the ball moving. He had a couple great passes to put them on the board. So yeah, LSU, man, shout out to LSU. I'll eat my crow on this one. I had Clemson at home to cover, and that just did not happen. So I think the most shocking big matchup of the weekend was obviously Alabama and Florida State. Um, to say I saw that coming would be a complete lie, because I ran like 30 scenarios in my head, and like I did not see Florida State winning really in any of them. I thought Florida State roster was just completely outmatched by Alabama going into the game. I thought Ty Simpson would have been able to play a lot better. I thought Ryan Grubb coming back to Alabama was going to be, or coming back to meet with DeBoer was going to be a huge game changer. And yeah, I just honestly didn't think Alabama or Florida State's roster could, hold up with Alabama. But boy, was I wrong. And to think, I'm pretty sure Lee Corso was the only person in this world, Florida State winning. I know some people picked Florida State to cover, but I genuinely did not see a single person pick Florida State to actually win. And for them to go and dominate the way they did against the Alabama team was extremely impressive. It was so hard to judge Florida State preseason wise, just because obviously they had a 2-10 season last year. They had a lot of turnovers with the roster. A turnover with the roster. They were bringing in a new quarterback who honestly wasn't that great at Boston College. So they just had so many unknowns with the roster that it was just so hard to judge and gauge what type of season and what type of team Florida State was going to be. But if that's the real Florida State, if that's the Florida State has a real chance of winning the ACC. Oh, they have more than a real chance of winning the ACC and finding their way into the playoffs. They just absolutely dominated Alabama's line in the trenches, both sides. I did not expect Alabama the way they did. That defensive line of Alabama could not hold up with Florida State's offensive line. And I think that's the Gus Malzahn factor. He is a great quarterback, or a great offensive coordinator when it comes to mobile quarterbacks. Obviously, he had that national championship running up team back in the day with a good running quarterback. Um, Thomas Castellano played exactly how he should have played. He did not make any mistakes. He was running to actually make plays, not like running to extend plays or to get out of trouble. He was, they were dialing up QB design runs, to get yards, and he was effective on his feet. He made timely throws. Florida State has a couple receivers who were extremely fast and athletic. He was making good passes, didn't make too many mistakes. So shout out Thomas Castellano and Florida State's defense, man. They were absolutely all over Alabama, man. Um, I just Alabama could get nothing the whole entire game. I don't know if that's a lot because of, well, obviously that is because of Florida State's defense, but I also think it's just because maybe Ty Simpson is not that guy. I mean, this is a guy who's been in the program for 4 years. He's had a couple different coaches, and he still hasn't been able to start. I'm starting to think that he is really just maybe not that good of a player because if he was, I feel like he would have already played more. Last time we saw him play was against Florida or South Florida when when Milrow got benched and he absolutely stunk it up. And for this to be his first start against a team that people thought they should have manhandled, to play like that, I think if you're an Alabama fan, that's a little disappointing. Um, but yeah, man, I was just genuinely surprised that Alabama was getting manhandled in the trenches like that, man. The offensive line of Florida State was just getting whatever they wanted. They were pushing them back, just getting so much yard for the runners. And yeah, man, Alabama, they have a lot to figure out. Kalen DeBoer, he genuinely looked like he was in over his head. Like he looked like he did not know what to do out there. And if you're playing like that against Florida State, a team who had a lot of question marks coming into this year, how are you going to play against Georgia? How are you going to play against Texas? And I'm not trying to overreact. It's week one. We have a lot of stuff to figure out, or teams have a lot of stuff to figure out. But I see a lot of people saying, oh, it was a trap game. It was a trap game. It's week one. You can't have a trap game again in week one. You have had 7 months to prepare for this team. It cannot be a trap game. That is not a trap game. They just got dominated on both sides of the line, and they just could not defend. And the offense looked bad. It looked stagnant. Ty Simpson was out there running for his life. Um, so yeah, Alabama has a lot to clean up. And again, not trying to overreact. There's a lot of season left. But their schedule is only going to get tougher. So they have Wisconsin. That should be, a pretty easy win. But then right after Wisconsin, they play Georgia, they play Tennessee, they play Oklahoma, and those are teams who have extremely good defenses. We saw Tennessee's defense and how they were playing against Syracuse. Oklahoma, we know their defense is going to be legit. Obviously, Georgia always has a good defense under Kirby Smart. So if FSU's defense is doing that to you, then this might be a tough year for Alabama. It might be a tough year, but we don't want to overreact over here. Speaking of Miami, we'll touch on Miami versus Notre Dame. This is another game that I think this was the best game of the weekend. It kind of had a little bit of everything: defense, late game, thrilling excitement. Notre Dame versus Miami, Catholics versus convicts. This was a game I am proud to be right about. I had Miami winning. Obviously, they were +2.5, so obviously I had them to I had their spread. But I also had money line. People were wrong about Carson Beck, man. I think people were wrong. I said he got a bad rap last year at Georgia. There was kind of so much dysfunction around him, in terms of no running game. The wide receiver room wasn't really good. The offensive line couldn't block, and for whatever reason, Carson Beck is the one who got 100% of the blame. He went to a new school, to a new environment, reset, and I think that was the best decision because when I thought he was going to the NFL. I thought it was going to be either NFL or going back to Georgia. And when he decided to transfer to Miami, to me, it was kind of a big surprise, but it looked to be a good move, man, because what they got going on in Miami, I think they can replicate exactly what they did last year with Cam Ward. Um, that offensive line of Miami is. I know Mario Cristobal. He is a former offensive lineman. He knows how to develop offensive line. He knows how to recruit offensive linemen. But that offensive line of Miami was absolutely dominating Notre Dame, man. Um, I know the game was close, but in the trenches, it really did not feel close. Obviously, Notre Dame is a team who you can never count out until the clock hits zero. We learned that from last year. But the score felt a lot closer than what the actual game was because, like I said, on both lines, the defensive line of Miami was just absolutely on fire, man. Ruben Bain, he is a dog, man. Everybody knew he was a dog, but he just really wasn't able to stay healthy these last couple of years, so we really weren't able to see, how well he was. But that offensive line and the defensive line of Miami, on that last possession when Notre Dame was driving down the field to try and score, I mean, that defensive line was just on fire. They had like 2 sacks. Obviously, they had a sack that caused, Notre Dame to run the out of time. Um, Ruben Bay had an interception off the tip pass. Uh, that was the biggest question mark for me with Miami is with how terrible that defense was last year, especially the secondary. I was, just concerned to see if it was still going to be like that this year. But I mean, that defense looked extremely improved, man. They looked fast, they tackled, they were hitting hard, they were getting pressure on the quarterback. So yeah, Miami, they look good. Notre Dame also looks good. All ended up being 24-27. So a couple different things go their way. We could be having a different conversation. But that first half of Notre Dame was, I don't really know what they were doing. At one point, I had to like look up if like Jeremiah Love was hurt because like that first half, the first quarter, like I really did not see him out there that much. And when he was out there, like they weren't really running with him. Um, he is your best player by far. He is a top 5 preseason Heisman candidate. He is your workhorse. I don't understand. You have an elite offensive line. I truly don't understand why Notre Dame is not giving him the ball 30 times a game. Maybe that goes to Miami's defensive line and the fact that they were just pushing Notre Dame around. I don't know if that was it. But the fact that you are not, feeding your best player the ball, especially with a true or first time starting quarterback, was extremely surprising to me. Because in my previews, that's what I talked about. I talked about Miami most likely they were going to try and stack the box and force CJ Carr to beat them through the air. And it seemed like that's what they were doing because, like I said, the running game for Notre Dame was not there, and they were forcing CJ Carr to beat them through the air, and in the first half he was struggling, man. I'm not gonna lie, he was struggling. It looked like that defense was getting to him. The offense was just not in sync and not together for Notre Dame. But towards the second half, he started playing a little better. He looked a little more comfortable. He obviously made some incredible plays down the stretch to keep things alive. He's a little more of an athlete than I thought. Riley Leonard obviously last year was extremely well with his legs. They kind of had like a quarterback designed run game plan most games. But towards the end of the game, CJ Carr, he made a lot of plays with his feet to keep things going and keep things alive. So I was very impressed, with his legs and his ability to run. Obviously, that crowd, that environment in Miami was electric. That's a tough position for a first time starting quarterback to be. If this doesn't prove anything, winning on the road in college football is hard. It does not matter how good you are. Going into a top team's road environment, it's a hard thing to do. We obviously saw um, Clemson, or not Clemson, but we saw Texas lose on the road. Obviously, with Notre Dame, they lost on the road. That's a hard thing to do as a first time starter. Um, but yeah, let's talk about Carson Beck for a little bit. Like I said, he got a bad rap last year, um, but I thought he played an extremely good game. He did not do too much. He made great throws when he needed to. That touchdown throw he had to the guy who caught it with one hand, that was a great play. He made a couple other timely throws. That game-winning drive that they had, or the game-winning drive to kick the field goal that they had, he just looked poised. He looked comfortable. He looked like the moment wasn't too big for him. He went out there, made some key passes, moved the ball up the field, with pretty ease. Um, and like I said, yeah, he looked comfortable. Um, This is a guy who has so much experience in the SEC. He's played in the SEC championship game. He's, you know, they've won the SEC championship, obviously. Um, the moment didn't look too bright for him. This is a guy, like I said, with so much experience. He was able to handle that. But yeah, Miami's offense looks good. They were able to get in the red zone so many times against a great elite Notre Dame defense. That is a returning defense last year who was top 5 in the country. And just throughout the game, it just felt like Miami was just kind of able to get whatever they wanted offensively. Things felt like they were almost living in the red zone of Notre Dame the whole entire game. Um, so yeah, I think the offense is going to be fine. The defense for Miami looks more improved. The trenches of Miami looks pretty good. So I think Miami is going to be a very, very solid team this year. A couple other games from this weekend that I want to touch on real quick. Georgia Tech and Colorado Friday night. I had Georgia Tech winning. I had Georgia Tech, covering the spread on this one. Like I said, I just thought Georgia Tech going into this game had way too much on the offense and defense compared to Colorado. I thought, they were the tougher team. I thought they were the more talented team, the more physical team. I will say one thing I was wrong about, though, is Caden Salters. This is a guy, like I said, he came from Liberty. He doesn't have a lot of experience with FBS level talent, obviously playing in a group of 5 against lesser talents. Um, I thought he was going to struggle, but he honestly looked pretty good. He looked comfortable. Obviously, Colorado jumps out early, forces a couple turnovers against Georgia Tech. It almost seemed like they were going to have him on the ropes, but Georgia Tech resettled. They eventually got into their groove of Georgia Tech football and was able to, kind of pull away from that game. But um, yeah, that Kane Salters kid, I think he wouldn't be starting if he wasn't, good enough to start, obviously. But he impressed me a lot, man. He really impressed me a lot. But yeah, Georgia Tech, they just do what Georgia Tech does. That Georgia Tech brand of football is honestly pretty impressive. The fact that over the course of the game, it felt like it was like a heavyweight fight. The longer the fight went on, the more Colorado's offensive and defensive line got tired. Haynes King, obviously an impressive athletic quarterback, ran for 2 or 3 touchdowns. That Georgia Tech offensive line was just absolutely moving the defensive line of Colorado. And like I said, as the game went more and more on, you could just tell that the offensive line of Colorado just didn't have a lot of depth, and they were getting tired, and they just couldn't really hang with Georgia Tech's offensive line. But Colorado battled, man. They battled. They stayed in it. They had a chance to win it at the end. That was honestly the worst coaching the worst coaching I saw for the whole entire weekend was the fact that you have 2 timeouts. Obviously, Dion has 2 timeouts at the end with a minute left, and you somehow don't even get the ball over the 50, and you still have 2 timeouts in your pocket. That was absolutely mind blowing. After the first stop, I thought he was going to call timeout. I understand he didn't. That was fine. You didn't want to call it that early. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. But then after Kane Salter, obviously he made that terrible run to run sideways out of bounds instead of running straight or getting down. Um, the fact that they didn't call the timeout before that was insane. The clock went from like 40 seconds to like 19 seconds with just that one play. Um, but yeah, that was one of the worst coaching mishaps I've seen in quite some time, if I'm being honest. But yeah, shout out Georgia Tech. Another Friday night matchup that we had was Baylor versus Auburn. Baylor traveling over to Waco to play in that Friday night game. That Baylor crowd was impressive, man. They showed out. The students showed out on that one. This is one we were wrong about. I liked Baylor going into this game. I had them to cover the spread. Vegas seemed to have known something on this game because Auburn was always favored, even though a lot of people I felt like were betting and leaning towards Baylor. Um, I just thought I with all the stuff going on around and with all his confidence issues and just all the stuff you heard throughout camp about Auburn, I just really didn't have a lot of faith in Auburn to win this one. Um, the arm of Jackson Arnold still looks like a problem. It still looks pretty questionable. Um, that was kind of the thing last year. Obviously, he's an elite athlete. He can run on the ground. He's great with his legs, but I still didn't see enough through the air for me to really have a lot of confidence. Um, for him in the future, but nonetheless, he's still an elite playmaker. Had a couple of good runs. He did make a couple key throws. But yeah, Auburn, they just kind of controlled that whole entire game. Baylor, they had their moments early on. Robert Sawyer or Sawyer Robertson looked pretty good. He was throwing the ball around, but just as the game went on, it just felt like Auburn just had too much talent for Baylor to deal with. I guess that's the discrepancy between the SEC and the Big 12. Even when Auburn doesn't really have a great team, they can go in and kind of dominate a Big 12 team. But yeah, shout out to Auburn, man, because like I said, I had Baylor to win. I know a lot of people had Baylor to win. So yeah, shout out Auburn. That's a good win for the program moving forward. So yeah, shout out Auburn. One of the biggest surprises of the weekend for me was in the Tennessee and Syracuse game. Um, Obviously, I picked Tennessee to win. I did pick Syracuse to cover. I think the spread was like 13 and a half, 14 and a half. I bet it at like 19 and a half, 18 and a half. So I did not think Tennessee was going to lose that game. I just did not see that happening. But I was very, very, very surprised with Tennessee's offense, man. Um, my biggest question for Tennessee coming to the season, they brought back a pretty good defense. I know the defense was going to be good. My biggest question for them was the offense. The fact that they got a quarterback from App State, who was at UCLA briefly, but they had a quarterback from App State who transferred in the spring portal, only had a few months to kind of work into the season and work into the team. I was really, really, really worried about that offense. I just didn't think that was enough time to click. Obviously, that Josh Heupel offense is a kind of a tough offense to learn, and especially learn that quick. But he came out guns blazing, man. That Tennessee offense looked explosive. It looked fast. It looked quick. He was getting the ball out on time, on target. And he's a lot better athlete with his feet than I thought. I obviously didn't see a lot of App State games last year, so I, just didn't really see him play a lot. But he's a lot much better athlete than I thought he would be, and he has a much better arm than I thought. And like I said, I just did not see that coming. So that's probably my biggest surprise of the week is Tennessee's offense looks explosive, and if they compare that with a defense that looked really, really good, Tennessee might be in the mix, man. Because I was not high on Tennessee coming into this year. In my preseason rank, I think I had Tennessee ranked at 23. But if they can put together complete games like that, I think they're going to be a lot better team than I expected them to be. On the week one picks this week, we didn't do so good. We didn't do so good. Went 2 for 3. Not bad, but not good. Like I said, if I can be above 50% for the year, I will be happy. So to start out 2 for 3, we got some work to do, but not the worst position to be in. I was obviously wrong about Texas. Uh, I was right about Miami. I was wrong about Clemson, wrong about Alabama. I was right about Georgia Tech. I was wrong about Baylor. So yeah, we're gonna try and do better next week. But like I said, that's the game of college football, man. You think you know what's gonna happen, and the complete opposite happens. I'm pretty sure Lee Corso was the only person in the country, or just the only person in general, to have LSU and Florida State winning. So shout out to him, man. He went 6 for 6 on his picks, man. What a way to go out. Um, College game day crew. The whole thing was about Lee Corso. Well deserved, well deserved. And for him to go 6 for 6 on his final, game day, headgear day thing was honestly impressive. So shout out Lee Corso, man. And also, I want to give a week one shout out to the ACC. This was a big, big week for the ACC. And I think they were pretty impressive. They had obviously a lot of non-conference games against high-level teams that, in my opinion, had a lot of weight with it. Had a lot of weight come with it. Obviously, Clemson, that one hurt. That was a big letdown. But I think a lot of the other teams held their weight. Syracuse, obviously, the final score probably doesn't show it, but they fought tough with Tennessee, man, and that's a Syracuse team who's is a middle to mid low tier ACC team this year. They obviously lost a lot of players last year, and for them to hang around with Tennessee for a little bit was pretty impressive. Obviously, Virginia Tech and South Carolina. Virginia Tech had South Carolina on the ropes. That was a 10-8 game up until that punt return that kind of broke the game open for South Carolina, and they took that momentum and ran with it. But the defense of Virginia Tech was giving South Carolina fits, man. It was giving South Carolina trouble. The fact that South Carolina had one touchdown up until pretty much that kickoff or that punt return in the late third quarter. So Virginia Tech was another one. Obviously, Florida State knocking down Alabama. Georgia Tech taking down Colorado. TCU and North Carolina play tonight, but North Carolina has a chance. So yeah, obviously it wasn't as great of a weekend as it could have been for the ACC. Obviously, the big dog Clemson kind of let the conference down, but I think the ACC had a great showing. Miami, I forgot to mention Miami, and the fact that they beat Notre Dame, who everybody has as a perennial top 5, top 6 team in the country. So yeah, shout out to the ACC, man. They showed up, they fought hard, they kind of did their job in this weird landscape of college football where you have these two power conferences with the Big Ten and the SEC. The ACC, I think, kind of showing that, hey, we're still here, we're not going away yet, and we still got some really good teams in the conference. So shout out to ACC, man. Yeah, so that's it for the week 1 recaps. If this is what we have in store for this year college football, then it is going to be an incredible year. I appreciate you guys for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, drop down who your favorite team is, who you guys root for. We're going to have a week 2 preview later this week. Might do some stuff around the AP Top 25 when that comes out. So stay tuned. Turn on the likes, turn on the notifications, so you can stay up to date on the newest podcast episodes. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.